Hello guys, welcome to another episode of the challenge 5k to 100k. We are 5 months and a half since we started the challenge, and let me tell you, these 15 days was absolutely Sunrun. I'm glad to share with you some hands that we had throughout these 2 weeks, and at the end I'll share the results with you. Let's do it. Alright, so the first hand, really interesting one. We are playing the 2-4-8 and we have an open from the cutoff from a recreational to 24. The button, which is a regular, decides to 3-bet to 84, and we are on the big blind with ace king off. And we are playing about 150 straddles deep, and here if we are playing about 100 straddles, I think it's interesting here to just jam out of position. I think it's interesting, but 150 starts to be a little bit too deep, so I decided to go for the called for bet. So I went for 252, the initial raiser folds, and now the button decides to call. The flop comes 4-3 deuce with 2 clubs. We have ace king with the king of clubs, and here I went for a small size for bet pots, and we are playing a little bit deep. I think it makes sense to go between 20% and 25%. I went for 25% here, so I went for 160, and now the villain decides to jam. This is a very interesting scenario, and the first thing that we have to do here is to calculate our pot odds. So this is the first step that we have to do. So the pot, when I put the 160, the total pot is 710, so we need now to include his 160, because here on this side they put all together, so the 2400, obviously that goes for the total pot, but that's not going to be the amount that is going to be on the pot, right? So on this side they just put everything together, so we need to calculate ourselves. So the total pot now 710, so we need to add his 160, so in this case would be 870, and then it's going to be our stack, right? So 836 in 870. So these we can see straight away that is going to be close to 2 to 1, and that means that we need to be roughly a little bit less, right? Because it will be, if it was 870, that would mean that it will be 2 to 1, and we have 836. That means a little bit less than 2 to 1. So 2 to 1 is going to be 33.3%, and in this case it's going to be a little bit less, and it's going to be about 33%. So we need 33%, so these are our pot odds, 33% to be our threshold for being on break even. So we need to have at least 33% equity against his range, and these bring us to the second phase. So we need to identify villain's range, and here what I like to do is to try to understand what can he be jamming here. It can be like jacks, queens, maybe tens, and then something interesting is to understand what the suits that we have. So we have ace king, and our king is the king of clubs. And what does that mean? That it means that the combos that he can have kings, because he can still have kings and aces playing as a call, of course, playing as a call after a called for bet, very normal to have kings and aces. But here, because we have the king of clubs, the combinations of kings that he's going to have, the 3 combinations, none of them is going to have the club, of course. So I believe that he can still have kings as a shove, because he will still feel that he needs a little to protect a little bit more, because we can still have like ace king of clubs or king queen of clubs, and he doesn't want to have like a club on the turn. So I think these kings can still shove. But in the other hand, we have the ace of hearts. Having the ace of hearts now means that the aces that he can have, which is the 3 combos, 2 of those is going to have the ace of clubs. And I believe that intuitively it wouldn't be a hand that he would shove, right? If he has like aces with the ace of clubs, most likely he can just call, right? He doesn't need to protect much, he wants to induce the bluffs, so I think it makes sense him to just call. But what I like to create is like a pessimistic scenario and an optimistic scenario. To identify the equity that we're going to have against their range, I will define a pessimistic scenario on this situation. So I'll give him a very simple scenario of having jacks to aces. So if he jams like all the jacks, queens, kings and aces, that will mean that he would have 12 combos of jacks and queens, so 6-6, that we have about 40%. And why is that? Because we have 3 aces, 3 kings, and 4 fives. So that is 10 outs for 2 streets. That's going to be about 40%. So against these 12 combinations, we have about 40%. On 3 combinations that you have kings, then we have 3 aces and 4 fives and the backdoor flush draw. So that's going to be roughly about 30% against these three combos. And the one that we have the least is going to be when you have aces and if he jams that, but we are on the pessimistic scenario. So if he jams aces, then our ace king is going to have a very little equity. So when you have both combinations with the ace of clubs, then we just have roughly about 9%. And when he has the combination without the club, then we have roughly 13%. And obviously here, most of the equity is going to be on the shop pot. So we have already these, and we can see that the biggest cluster is going to be these 12 combos that we have 40%. And then we have three combos where we have 30% and three combos where we have 10%. So now to understand what's our equity against the range, what we have to do is to, on the first cluster, multiply 12 times 40. So that's going to be 480. And then we have the combinations that we have kings, and that one we have 30%, three combinations. So that means that it's 3 times 30 is going to be 90. And then for the 10% for the aces, three combinations, the average is going to be 10%, 10 times 3 is going to be 30, and now we add all together, so it's going to be 480 plus 90 plus 30, and that's going to be 600, and then we just divide for the total combinations of combos that's going to have, so it's going to be the 12 plus 3 plus 3, which is 18. So 600 divided by 18 is going to be roughly 33.3%. So on the pessimistic scenario, we can see already that we are a little bit above the threshold that we wanted to be, which means that on an optimistic scenario that we can still add, for example, 10s that we have 40% equity, another 6 combos. And if we reduce the combinations that you have aces, for example, reducing that 2 combinations that you have the ace of clubs, very intuitive just to call, less combinations that we will have very few equity. And if we even increase, for example, the ace queen of clubs, ace jack of clubs, ace 10 of clubs, that is hands that we have about 52% equity against that hands, that means that on the optimistic scenario, our equity from our hand against the range is going to be about 39 to 40%. Even if it's on the middle of these, we're going to be always a plus EV decision to call. So we are happy to have done the call here. The opponent had pocket jacks without jack of clubs, and unfortunately we didn't get there. But the important situation was to understand how did we get to the call, and obviously that in game is really difficult to find all of this math, but what I try to do is to understand like quickly, first pot odds, second identify villain's range, and then see what's the cluster of hands that has the bigger and heavier portion. So in this case, like jacks and queens going to be there is already 12 combos. If tens is there is 18 combos. So it's really, really big. And obviously that we are blocking aces and kings, that just becomes like 3 and 3. So the heaviest portion, we're going to have 40%, and that will push really up our equity. And understanding these will give me a better conclusion on which decision should I take. And try to work these mentally, because it's very easy nowadays to just go to a solver to see an output and okay, well, this is a call or this is a fold, or go to an app and try to see equities, but without understanding the true fundamental to how to get there. It's the same when we were kids and we just use a calculator without doing manually, right? When you do manually, really understand the concept, and this really helps you understanding the fundamentals of poker. That's my opinion. Let me know what you guys think about this one. All right, so the next hand we are playing the 2-4-8, and we have king queen off on the cutoff, and we open to 24, and we have a recreational on the button. He decides to call, and he is the really loose passive player. He's the 52-12. We are playing heads up on the queen 6-5 rainbow. And here, while theory likes to check a lot out of position, but exploitatively, I believe that this would be a huge mistake against this type of player. So as we can see here, before I did my decision, I went to check his stats that we have available again, and we can see 52-12. And based on these is always to go for a bet with value here. And why is that? Because this is a player that tends to check a lot, meaning that even his value hands, he goes for a check. For example, if he has like pocket sevens or pocket eights. So this is a player that is not going to bluff, and is going to still check hands that he has value, and he should go for value. So there is no merits at all for us to be balancing our checking range on checking like king queen on this spot. So how can we exploit this type of players? We have just to fire. We start to put money inside of the pot, and that's what we decide to do. We went for 75% straight away because he doesn't bluff and he likes to call. So we went for 59, he called. The turn brings the 10 and opens spades. Now our strategy Simple. We just continue to put money in the pot, 75% again, 147, exactly for the same reasons as we did on the flop. And he decides to call, and the river brings an offsuit 3, and here again, same situation. We just go, we don't want to also to scare him and to go over bet shove, but I believe here 75% again makes the job done. We went for again 368, and he thinks for a while and decides to call 7-6 off. So against this type of player will be a huge mistake, because we would lose the full street of value that would increase and then will increase the bet on the river. We wouldn't get for $368 bet on the river if we wouldn't start increasing straight away on the flop. I believe that this is really important to identify the player that we are playing against and really apply the best strategy. Playing solver wise against this type of players, we are completely leaving money on the table. Please don't do that, and let me know what you guys think. Alright, so the next hand we are playing the 1-2-4, goes fold until the small blind, which is 27-16, so a little bit for the passive side, and he decides to go to open 14, and we are on the straddle with Jack-7 suited, and here we have just a clear continuation. We call, the flop comes Queen 10-5 rainbow, we have backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, and here for the naked eye, after we see a c-bet of 16, this is just a pure continuation. We always have to continue. We are playing very wide ranges, and we have tons of backdoor equity, so here is just a pure continuation with the Jack-7 of spades. We decide to call, the turn brings the 9, so now we have an open-ended, but it's an offsuit night, so it's a badugi board, and now he decides to go in 70, he goes about 40, which is about 60%, and here I think that our range wants to call a lot when it doesn't open like any flush draw, so even our nut combos will just call, and I believe that our hand here wants to call too. And the river brings another 9, so now pairs the turn card, and he decides to check. So when he decides to check, now obviously I need to understand where our range is, and I believe that is completely on the bottom. Jack high here after calling flop, calling turn to a bigger size, so it's completely on the bottom. Now what I want to understand is what I'm going to target on my opponent's range, what I want him to fold, and if I want him to fold like ace high, like ace jack or ace king, then half pot does the job. But I also want to include him to fold 10x, queen x, and maybe aces and kings, because if we see it, I can have still all the nut combos, right? Because when it checks river, it never has like a trap, and I can still have all the 2 pairs, well, not the flop ones, but I can have all the 10-9, the queen 9, 9-5 suited, which is one combo, but I have the queen 9, the 10-9, and then I have all the trips that he doesn't when he checks on the river and when he bets on the turn. So I have like the 8-9, I have the jack 9, I have the king 9, and then I have all the straights. So I have the king jack and the jack 8, because I'm just calling on the turn when it's a badugi board. So I have so many of the nutted hands that I can just purely put max pressure here. So after he checks, I believe that I just want him to make fold everything, and I went for a little bit over 2x spot, and fortunately he tanked for a while and he decided to fold. Let me know what you guys think about this one. Alright, so the last hand we are playing the 2-4-8, and we have an open from a good regular on the hijack to 20, and we have 9s on the button, and here we have 2 options. We can 3-bet or we can call. Normally what I like to do here on this situation is to see who are on the blinds, and if it's recreationals on the blinds, I tend to go for the call to invite them to the pot. So I decide to call. The big blind is a recreational, and the big blind decides to call, and we are 3-way on the flop, ace king 5 with 2 hearts. We have 9s, no hearts, and the recreational checks, and now the regular checks, and we decide to check here, pocket 9s. The turn brings an offsuit 8, and now the recreational checks, and the regular checks, and here is really important to understand what's happening. So when the regular checked on the flop, he can still have like some strong hands. He can still have like say ace kings, aces, kings, completely fine. But now when he checks on the turn, it's very, very clear that he has a showdown hand, because this is a really good board for him. So if we would have like queen jack, queen 10, or hearts, anything that will have equity here, or even like a pure bluff, it would make sense for him to start applying pressure and to start to bet. But when he decides to check flop and checks turn with the recreational there, that means that he's never gonna have a very value hand. Obviously that is never gonna trap with the recreational there, and also he's not gonna have a hand that does not have anything. So he's gonna have a hand that he has pure showdown value. So in this case it's gonna be like king queen, king jack, king 10, or queens, jacks or tens, right? So these are going to be the hands that you just want to go to showdown. So understanding these, like if we are playing on autopilot, we just see nines here and we just want to go to showdown. Oh, nines is still, you know, is still decent to go to showdown here. Wrong. Nines here is never going to be good when we're facing two checks from that player because of the reasons that I said before. So I believe that is important to start to apply pressure on those hands, like which is the king queen, king jack, king 10, queens, jacks, and 10. So I think here it makes a lot of sense for us to start betting and to bluff our hand. So we went for 65. Recreational folds, and now the regular decides to call. The river brings the 10 of suit 10, and now this card improves the king 10 and 10-10, but it still have a lot of hands that it didn't improve, like the king jack, king queen, and jacks and queens, right? So that is 12 combos of jacks and queens, and then king queen and king jack is going to be 12 combos, so 24 combos. So we can still apply tons of pressure on these 36 combos, right? So I think that it makes sense to go still for a bet here, and we go for a large one to apply pressure. So I went for 200, and he tanked for a while and decides to fold. So what I think that is interesting on this hand, and the reason that I put it here, is that sometimes we have a hand that we can think, if we are playing on autopilot, that it can go to showdown, but in reality, very, very unlikely that's going to be good, and I believe that it makes sense to apply pressure. That's my 2 cents. Let me know what you guys think. And now it's time for the results. So for these last 15 days, we played about 32 hours, 7,700 hands, and we won $13,166. So we played way less compared to the previous months, but I can't really complain. The results for these last 2 weeks was absolutely insane, and hopefully we're going to continue to run good as we are doing. For the challenge total, we played so far 5.5 months, 772 hours. We played 187,000 hands, around that, and we won $66,583. So our bankroll at the moment is $71,583. So we are 71% to achieve the goal. Hopefully we're gonna get there soon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like, please press the like button. I'll see you next time.